Nintendo has been hated non-stop by the entire internet for their insane decisions. From their sudden and extreme price increases, to the countless lawsuits against fans and innocent companies, here are some of the biggest reasons why Nintendo is one of the most hated video game developers. And one of the biggest reasons is Nintendo's greedy pricing strategy. Now, to understand why Nintendo is so greedy, I want to remind you of what it was like when Nintendo actually cared about their fans. And one of the most important people in this mission was Satoru Iwata. Satoru Iwata was the global president of Nintendo from 2002 to 2015. Iwata was known for being a very friendly figure, and he kind of understood that the world of gaming was about fun and not about business. And in 2011, Iwata proved that this was his personality in the most honorable way. Because after the 3DS released at the very high price of $250, Nintendo was starting to lose money. But instead of firing employees to make up for the losses like most executives would do, Iwata cut his salary in half. Iwata also had a big part in starting Nintendo Directs up and expanding their reach. He hosted a large number of Directs and he came off as very warm and friendly. But after Iwata unfortunately passed away and some new leadership came in, Nintendo started to become a more greedy, business-first company. And while you might think that Nintendo's greed started when they priced Mario Kart World at $80, it's been happening for far longer. Let me give you a couple of examples. One example of this greed is the release of Super Mario 3D All-Stars back in 2020, and it all has to do with the controversial decision Nintendo made to make this game a limited time release. Because Super Mario 3D All-Stars was only available between September 18th, 2020 and March 31st, 2021. With Super Mario 3D All-Stars, you can really see the business side of Nintendo shining through, and along with that, the greed. Because as it turns out, selling 3 best-selling Mario classics on a system where they aren't at all available for a limited release during the holiday season is the perfect storm to sell as many units of something in the shortest time possible. And this strategy ended up really paying off for Nintendo because when it was all said and done, Super Mario 3D All-Stars sold over 9 million copies. Now, of course, there were some physical copies that kind of floated around for a couple of years because Nintendo probably wanted to sell those physical copies, but they prioritized having a limited release just to sell as many copies of 3D All-Stars as they could at that time. But this is a perfect example of how Nintendo puts money over their fans. But that example is far from the only time that Nintendo has milked their fans for profit. If you remember The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, that was the first time that Nintendo raised the $60 pricing standard to $70. And while that might sound like it makes sense because Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has a lot of content in it, but this large amount of content in Tears of the Kingdom was kind of reused. Because while Tears of the Kingdom was an impressive game, it reused a lot of the maps and textures from its prequel, Breath of the Wild. And I honestly feel like Nintendo was just testing out $70 games, but they also took advantage of the hype of Tears of the Kingdom to make a little extra profit off of a game that was already significantly boosted by content Nintendo had previously used. But those examples don't even include something else that Nintendo is notoriously greedy when it comes to. Those things being remakes and ports. Nintendo knows that their fanbase is nostalgic and they're rich because of it. So when it comes to either porting or remastering their older games, Nintendo charges the highest price possible that they can get away with. Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is the best example of this. The remake itself costs $60, and while that's a problem on its own, it's not the main issue here. The issue is that the $60 price tag is the highest price this game has ever been. Luigi's Mansion 2, or known as Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon on the 3DS, cost $40 when it came out. That means that Nintendo sees Luigi's Mansion 2 HD as such a valuable asset that they are willing to charge $20 more than the historical high for this game on the 3DS. And this strategy is insane on its own, but let me back it up with a recent example. The Super Mario Galaxy 1+2 bundle released at $70 just about a month ago. But if you add up the price that you would have paid for both games originally on the Wii, which is $50 each, it totals out to $100. And with that bundle, there is a bit of depreciation here. The games are less money than they were originally on the Wii, so that's a good thing. The issue is that Nintendo is selling these remasters separately for $40 each on the eShop, which is only $10 less than the original price on the Wii. But Nintendo's pursuit of money doesn't stop at games, because Nintendo's legal decisions have also proven to be quite unpopular. There is of course the unpopular Palworld lawsuit started by Nintendo, where Nintendo is basically claiming that Palworld stole mechanics that they patented to use in their game. And the optics of this lawsuit are actually horrible. It's a very concerning thing that Nintendo is trying to trademark game mechanics, essentially. In my opinion, and most people's opinions, trying to patent game mechanics just seems like it's going too far. Like, it's one thing to try to patent your intellectual property, or trying to keep people from copying your brand image. To me, it's kind of like if Coke tried to sue Pepsi for being too similar. It's just kind of a crazy claim. But the Palworld lawsuit isn't the only legal dispute that's been controversial with Nintendo lately. There's also the entire Switch 2 bricking situation that occurred earlier this year. Basically, Nintendo changed the terms for their EULA, or their end user license agreement, to make it so that they could brick your Switch or Switch 2 if you downloaded software that didn't comply with their terms. Now, I haven't seen a single verified case of this actually happening, and you guys can tell me down in the comments if I'm wrong about that. But regardless, the Brazilian government was not having it, because Procon SP, the Brazilian Consumer Protection Agency, essentially told Nintendo that the terms of this EULA are questionable under Brazilian law. But now I want to discuss who or what turned Nintendo into such a greedy and entitled company. Well, the way I see it, it's pretty simple. Nintendo has always been this way. A good example is the Wii Sports dispute between former Chief of Operations at Nintendo of America, Reggie Fils-Aimé, and the executives at Nintendo Global. Reggie wanted Wii Sports to be a pack-in game for the Wii, and he pushed really hard for this to be the case. He thought it would be a good idea to show off the proprietary concept of the Wii to people and kind of how to use it. But of all people, Shigeru Miyamoto, who is not at all known for being involved on the business side of Nintendo, pushed back, where Miyamoto stated, quote, "Neither of you understands the challenges of creating software that people love to play. We do not give away our software." Wii Sports was only included with the Wii because Satoru Iwata, who I mentioned earlier, decided that it wouldn't be a bad idea to include Wii Sports with the Wii because it would teach people how to use it and kind of explain the technology. Miyamoto was reportedly not happy about this. And I think that's the best example to show how Nintendo has always operated as a business. Miyamoto's quote summed it all up. They don't give away their software because they think it's extremely valuable. Next, I want to discuss the social media content and backlash that Nintendo has been getting about these crazy decisions that they have been making. Now, real quickly, if you're enjoying this video so far, I would appreciate if you would hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Also, if you want to support my channel this holiday season, check out my Best Buy storefront by clicking the link down below in the description, as Best Buy is currently running tons of holiday sales. I'll be updating my storefront with these deals, so click the link down in the description to check it out. Just as a disclaimer, I do make a small commission off of any sales that are made. But let's get back to the video. Now, before I dive into how all of this got started and what exactly I think of it, I want to make clear the sheer magnitude of views that these hate videos are getting. Take this video from YouTuber Nintendine titled "Nintendo Lied and Nobody Cares." That video managed to get 162,000 views by the time that I'm recording this video. And although the clickbait title definitely has something to do with the large amount of views that that video got, that's not even close to the most viral Nintendo hate video. video. Take this one with another clickbait title called "The Switch 2 is Evil and I'm Tired of Pretending It's Not." And that video got 666,000 views at the time of recording. And despite the irony of that number being exactly what it is, that is a lot of views for a Nintendo video. And whether you believe it or not, Nintendo hate videos can get even more views than that. Because this video from Xander J shows how much toxicity can spread like wildfire. The video titled "I Hate Mario Kart World" in all caps got over 1.4 million views. Now just to be clear, I'm not hating on any of these videos because they do make some valid points. But 1.4 million views on a video in the Nintendo niche is absolutely crazy. Like, Nintendo related videos don't even get close to this much on a normal basis. But besides the views themselves, there are really good reasons why YouTubers keep making these hate videos, and I'll get to them in a moment. But I first want to take a trip back to where this all started. It's April of 2025 and Nintendo just aired the Switch 2 Direct. Fans are happy that the new console was just announced and they saw an in-depth look at it. But the mood quickly begins to change when people start accessing the Switch 2 website. More specifically, the part about Mario Kart World. Because after scrolling down the page a bit, people realized that Mario Kart World had the unprecedented price of $80. That's where this Nintendo hate trend really started. And that's the point where people were going so wild that we saw some real misinformation like Mario Kart World being $90 in the US for a physical copy. But not too long after that, it was reported that some physical game cards would actually have the data downloaded from the internet, not actually preloaded onto the game card, called game key cards. Now, despite these types of game cards being made specifically for third parties who wanted to cut costs, it was reported as if these were the new standard. And somehow this trend of hating Nintendo has managed to stretch its way throughout 2025, and it seems like there are still negative Nintendo videos that are coming out to this day. But it all makes perfect sense when you think about one factor that I haven't mentioned before, and that factor is money. Remember that video called "Nintendo Lied and Nobody Cares" that I mentioned earlier? Well, a conservative estimate for how much that video would have made would be $400 to $500 from ads alone. The next video, titled "The Switch 2 is Evil and I'm Tired of Pretending It's Not," assuming it was fully monetized, likely made around $1,500. And finally, that video titled "I Hate Mario Kart World" that got 1.4 million views could easily have made that YouTuber $5,000. That's quite a lot of money for just ranting about how bad Nintendo is. Now, as a disclaimer, I don't actually know how much those videos made, but that goes to show how much hating Nintendo can actually make a YouTuber. And Nintendo ragebait being popular isn't limited to YouTube. This type of content goes viral on platforms like TikTok and X as well. Now keep in mind, not all of these videos that I'm mentioning are pure ragebait. Some of them are actually really well thought out and edited. But finally, let's discuss one of the craziest lawsuits that Nintendo has ever started: Nintendo versus Palworld. Now, before I discuss what exactly is going on with the lawsuit at this point in time and what I think of it, I want to remind you of what exactly this situation is all about. And it all started back in September of 2024, around 8 months after Palworld first came out. Nintendo decided to take legal action against Pocket Pair, the developer of Palworld. Now, this case in itself is highly unusual for Nintendo standards, considering they usually sue people who directly pirate their games. But in this particular situation, Nintendo is trying to sue Pocket Pair over game mechanics. More specifically, Nintendo is trying to stake their claim on the action of throwing a ball at a creature to capture it in a video game. That right there is the main controversy of this lawsuit. The issue here is that Nintendo is citing a very general patent as the reason that Palworld is violating their IP. The main question here is whether or not Nintendo's concept that they patented was even legal in the first place. And that legal question is where the controversy really stems from as well. If Nintendo were to get their way and keep these patents legally upheld, it could mean that other companies will also try to file patents and sue over over these patents, over concepts that they really shouldn't be owning in the first place due to how general they are. This could effectively doom the gaming industry because developers would have to come up with extremely specific concepts in order to legally sell their game. Whether you like or hate Nintendo, this would be extremely dangerous for them to win. But now let's dive into the actual current status of this entire ordeal because it's pretty interesting. Now, unlike most Nintendo lawsuits, the Nintendo vs. Palworld dispute is a bit more complicated, because while Nintendo has filed a lawsuit in Japan against Pocket Pair, the actual standoff is taking place both in Japan and in the United States. And obviously, because these are two different countries, what Japan does might not be what the United States will do. But speaking of the United States, let's talk about what's actually going on there with the entire situation. Now, the patent in the United States that Nintendo is claiming that Palworld is violating is patent 12,403,397. Now, the patent itself has a lot of information, and I'm not going to go over all of it right now, but I'll put it on screen in case you want to take the time to read it. Now, the patent itself has a lot of complicated details, but there's one underlying theme here. The concept that Nintendo is trying to claim is extremely general. Trying to make an entire case over this one patent is definitely something that would be legally challenging for Nintendo to do. And because of that set of circumstances, the US Patent Office is re-examining Nintendo's patent. A re-examination is something that does not happen very often with patents at all. And because of that, the Patent Office probably believes that Nintendo doesn't have a legal patent. If the Patent Office decides that the patent is not allowed, this would likely make Nintendo's case fall apart in the United States. But knowing Nintendo's lawyers, they might try to appeal the decision, so it might not all be over at that point. Now, unlike Nintendo's patent situation going on in the US, they've actually filed legal proceedings in Japan. Now, the case itself is still over patents, but Nintendo is actually taking Pocket Pair to court in Japan. The difference here is that the case is far more progressed than in the US, where there's not really an official case and it's just a dispute. Now, in this case, there are 3 different patents that Nintendo is claiming Palworld has infringed upon. Similar to the US patent situation, all 3 of these have to do with game mechanics. In reparation, Nintendo is seeking the ban of Palworld in Japan and a monetary payout. Which, in my opinion, in the unlikely event that Nintendo were to actually win the case, they probably would not get the ban of Palworld and a monetary reparation at the same time. Now, of course, Pocket Pair is claiming that the patents aren't actually valid as they should be. Pocket Pair's main reasoning in this case is that several games in the past have also used similar concepts, and because of that, Nintendo can't straight up patent it. Now, the Japanese Patent Office seemed to go for this argument because they basically cited the same reason when they informally rejected Nintendo's patents. Now, keep in mind that this rejection is informal, so there's nothing legally binding at the time being. Because Nintendo does still have to respond before anything can move forward, and what will likely happen is they'll just narrow down the patent or completely change it so that they aren't formally rejected. This would have to be done very carefully because Nintendo would have to file a patent that's unique while making sure that their lawsuit doesn't fall apart. If they can succeed at doing this, they'll have a much stronger case when legal proceedings actually start. Now, like most legal cases, proceedings are usually very slow, so it might be a while until we actually see some results. But now let's discuss what the most likely outcome of this entire ordeal will be. First off, in the US, I don't really think that Nintendo will ever end up filing a legal case. It's looking very likely that the US Patent Office will reject Nintendo's patent, and that would give them no legal grounds to sue. The Patent Office very rarely reevaluates patents, so the fact that they're reevaluating Nintendo's patent probably means that they're going to reject it. Now, in Japan, the outcome will probably be a bit more complicated. As it stands right now, it's not looking good for Nintendo's current patents to be upheld. However, if they do revise them to make them a bit more original but yet still something that Palworld's violated, they might have more of a case. I do think that Pocket Pair has a really good chance of winning this case because Nintendo will have to be extremely strategic about how they proceed. Because there is still a chance that Nintendo might just decide to not revise the patent and completely drop the case. More than likely, they'll never end up getting the full reparations that they're requesting, and it might not even be worth it to go for partial reparations. In this situation, Nintendo really has to think about their US fan base who's really mad about this entire lawsuit. Regardless, I don't think it's impossible for Nintendo to win against Pocket Pair, but I think it's very unlikely that they would win, or that they would even decide to proceed forward. But we'll see what happens within the coming weeks and months. But anyway guys, that's gonna do it for today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out my Best Buy storefront. Thanks for watching.